pleasure. My name's Gail Powley. I have a day volunteer job, main volunteer job, being president of Technology Alberta, an organization that is part of the rainforest movement in Edmonton, and very pleased to be part of the Alberta-wide team. So thank you very much for the opportunity to give the introductions, and Happy New Year, everyone. Wonderful to be part of this beautiful community on a rainforest. And last night we gave a connector session here in Edmonton, and someone suggested we call it the brain forest. So all these tech companies here, and as per the slide, innovators, doers, dreamers, connectors, and builders. We're building an amazing tech ecosystem here to support the growth of Alberta's tech companies. So etiquette, with so many people here, and they all seem like regulars, I don't want to spend too much time other than, I guess in order to make sure we have an orderly 1-hour meeting with so many people, the etiquette is pretty important. So raise your hand function. I think everyone knows how to use that on Zoom if they want to speak, or type something into the chat, and one of us will bring that up in the discussion and possibly cue you if there's time for people to provide their own comments. Please stay muted unless you are talking or it's your turn to speak, because just how Zoom works, it can go to others that perhaps don't mean to talk, but they may rustle a paper and it can be disruptive. Annotate and poll features are anonymous. Chat and resources will be captured and posted in lunch notes in the Slack channel. Thank you. So as you all know, rainforest is an analogy coming out of the outstanding book, The Rainforest, Building the Next Silicon Valley. And as you all know, rainforests are unlike farms where it's not planted. However, all the factors are understood, controlled, optimized for particular outcomes. Well, those are farms, excuse me. These command and control structures are designed for delivering controlled outcomes, maximizing expected results. However, farms do not lend themselves to innovation or new ideas. So innovation is about taking risks, exploring new concepts, previously untried. Farms, on the other hand, are risk-averse, risk minimization. Rainforests are wild, untamed, and all the elements were there. It wasn't planted, but with the right soil, the right sun, the right climate, water, what a thriving ecosystem. And that's what we're trying to do here in Alberta. So vision is to build a world-class community of dreamers and doers connected by a common goal of making Alberta a fertile ground for building, developing, and growing innovative ideas into sustainable ventures. Mission, connect the community by strengthening the movement behind the Alberta tech industry around a framework of shared values of collaboration, community, and trust through storytelling. Thank you. All right, that's a lot of prints. Obviously, I won't go through that. Of course, you'll all recognize this is the Rainforest Social Contract. It was developed at the first Rainforest Summit by Brad and team several years ago now. Rainforesters assign it to individuals. It is a code of conduct, and it ensures everyone with the same values and mindset, and it really helps collaboration and trust. Anything else you want to mention on that, Bridget or Brad? We're all good. All right, 6 pillars of building an innovation ecosystem. Culture, leaders, resources, engaged activities, policy and infrastructure, role models. So there have been scorecards every year, and we rate how strong our innovation ecosystem is in all these areas and how important these areas are. So Bridget, did you want to talk to these numbers in particular?
To the pillars?
Yes.
I certainly can. I think that regardless of the naming of the pillars, the balance is probably more crucial, more important, and rainforest movement driving that strong pillar of culture and culture of trust. And that is why we are all here today, and why we continue to throw out these tendrils throughout the ecosystem to keep the culture of trust thriving. And so I'm sure Brad will want to speak more to that later in his presentation too, but that one being the most important.
Sounds great. Next slide. End of the intro to the rainforest. Thank you very much. And you get to introduce yourself now, Bridget.
Okay, sure, I will do that. So welcome everybody. I am just going to get the 400 screens I have open moved around a little so I can see what I'm doing. I am the community manager for Rainforest Alberta here in Calgary. For those of you I haven't met, I'm fairly excited about our turnout today, which has now maxed past 100. So fabulous way to kick off 2013. Thank you all for joining us, whether you've been around the Rainforest Block many a time or whether you are new. Did quite a bit of outreach over the holiday, so I'm really excited to see some new faces in the room. And I know we have Gail and others from the Edmonton Steering Committee here with us. Because of my insane amount of screens, I'm not able to peek into the room and see you all, but go ahead and throw your names in the chat. And we do really encourage you to be interactive in the chat. We're going to have two speakers today. We're actually going to turn back to Gail, and then we're going to have Brad Zumwalt speak about the vision of innovation in our province as we move into 2021. And so some of you may have heard rumblings of this theme we have for Rainforest as we kick off the year around Lunch Without Lunch panels, at least, talking about demystifying the startup world. So I've become borderline obsessed, I guess, with increasing the awareness amongst new audiences, specifically in Calgary, but across the province too, around the opportunities that exist within the innovation world, whether it be career pivots or becoming an entrepreneur, building a founding team, or whatever that might look like. So we will spend the next 3 months diving into demystifying that. We're going to hear from founders. We have Launch Party alumni winners Good Lawyer joining us, and really active Rainforest members. Good Lawyer joining us next week to talk about their story through their startup and what that has looked like, and sharing their lessons. The week following, we're going to have Jim Gibson, one of Rainforest founders, joining us from SAIT's Advanced School of Digital Technology. And we're going to have Mind Fuel joining us to talk about programs for youth. And as we move through the months, we're going to hear from different people who have pivoted careers from theater into tech, and all sorts of compelling, captivating stories. So we know you're all here today to hear from our strong leaders, and we hope that you continue to join us throughout the next few months to both learn about innovation, and if you're a leader or a role model, to help steward those newcomers through the rainforest. So in saying all of that, let's get started. We will make a concerted effort this year to have that networking time so that we can have space for those famous collisions that Rainforest is known for. Today, that may or may not happen. We'll see how the conversation goes after today's presentations. So kind of operating a little backward here, but I will now introduce Gail, and she did partially do that. But Gail Powley is the president of Technology Alberta, a volunteer-driven organization comprised of Alberta tech entrepreneurs and champions committed to growing Alberta's tech sector. She has been a founding member on Rainforest Edmonton's team and has been a steering committee member of the local Alberta Innovates Regional Innovation Network. Gail is a professional engineer, and she's been active in the tech sector for over 35 years, working in the industrial automation space for companies such as Procter & Gamble, Aspen Technologies, and more. She's founded volunteer organizations supporting STEM careers and welcoming newcomers and diversity, in partnership with Mentor Up Calgary and Edmonton, and in collaboration with Alberta Women's Science Network and Wisest. That is a mouthful. Lots of experience there. Gail, thank you for joining us today to share about Edmonton's vision for the coming years. And then after Gail, I'll introduce him now, though I'm sure many of you don't need an introduction, but many of you do, because I guess when we're talking about new audiences, not many people know about all the work Brad Zumwalt has been doing to grow the technology sector for over 30 years. He led Image Club, iWire, and Veer to acquisitions by Adobe, Getty, and Corbis, respectively. Today, Brad is leading initiatives to support other entrepreneurs and innovators. He co-founded Rainforest Alberta, this collective of us all working to improve Alberta's innovation ecosystem, and collaborated with the city to build Platform and the Innovation Center, which is set to open mid-2021. Brad is a former member of the boards of the Alberta University of the Arts, Science, Alberta Foundation, University, Technologies International, Northern Foundation, Viewpoint Foundation, and Social Venture Partners Calgary. So we are absolutely thrilled to have you both with us today. We are going to start with Gail sharing a bit about Edmonton's vision for the future of innovation.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, and I won't take too much time. A little bit about what's happening in the Edmonton region is that there's a whole new restructuring that puts the entrepreneurs even more at the heart of the area's innovation community. There's a new innovation authority, of which Tech Edmonton, Startup Edmonton, and other groups will be under that. The whole Alberta Innovate support of all of Alberta is a real interesting network where Alberta Innovate is providing, and has for many years, funding to specific regions so that they can put some additional time to where the gaps are, fill the gaps in their area. So actually the model in Edmonton was modeled after Calgary's regional innovation system, which is called CIC. And so we have elected members, of which I'm one, that may be from local innovation or provincial innovation networks. The gaps that we're filling are community initiatives, coaching, post-secondary institute, startup opportunities with students, common portal so that entrepreneurs don't have to fill in X number of, many forms for many grants. One form can give them access to a lot of information. And also access to capital. And I know that that Startup TNT, who's on the steering committee, is going to be speaking to this group at the end of the month. I saw on the agenda, and that's an opportunity to invest in tech companies that started in Edmonton, but last year they actually brought Calgary via Zoom, that brought us all together again to fund the province's tech companies across the province. So I am going to keep my comments short. So I talked about those areas. Look at the Edmonton RIN website, or look at the Alberta Innovate RIN website for all the RINs across the province and how they can help entrepreneurs. But I'd also like to make a comment on Technology Alberta and how we're working together with all these regions and across the province to raise the visibility of the tech companies. So we started with the AB Tech 100 list, was 100 new jobs that are being created by the tech industry this year. When we started that 3 years ago, we saw, especially through companies like Adabotics, that 100 is, the tech industry is creating way more than 100 new jobs a year. So the same year, it became AB Tech 1000. And then the next year, AB Tech 2000. And this year, it's AB Tech 3000. The tech industry has documented proof that we are creating 3,000 jobs across the province. So that's a province-wide initiative featured in newsletters. We feature 30 companies a month that are actively hiring. Great news story, important sector. Everyone needs to know this story. And then also First Jobs program was just announced, where we connect Alberta-wide young professionals, anyone under 30, which has a STEM background, but wants to work STEM and business background, who wants to work for tech companies. We have had 500 young professionals apply for these 50 positions. And we have had over 50 tech companies step up to say, we'll take a part-time young professional into our company. So just, talent has been an area where our tech companies say we need talent. So connecting talent is key. Connecting them with capital is key. And connecting them with business advice and giving them visibility. So I think that's all I want to say for now. And this probably is a good intro to the initiatives that Brad's going to focus on. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Fantastic. I'd love to learn. I wasn't aware of some of those cool things you're doing. I love that you've had to move the tech jobs from 100 to a couple thousand. We got to keep that going. And I think, Bridget, are you going to help me and pop up the first screen from Donna? And I'm going to keep my chat open here. When we talk about rainforest early on, we do talk about engaged activities. I would very much prefer this to get derailed by a bunch of comments, as opposed to me just droning on at you. And so I'm going to keep my chat open. And if anyone else can help me, if there's something that pops up in the chat, let's just cover that as we go. So a mental model, I'm a fan of the Farnham Street podcast. I don't know if anyone else follows Shane Parrish and Farnham Street out of Ottawa. And Farnham Street is a great resource. It talks about mental models. And one of the mental models that they cover is this very simple 3-step model when you're working on something. And it's first phase purpose, second phase measures, and the last phase method. And so the purpose piece, why do we care about this? Why are we talking about this at all? And I want Alberta and the co-founders that were involved in this years ago, and so many of you, the 100 plus on this call, want Alberta to be a spot that whatever industry or sector or career you want to have, Alberta is a place that you can do the highest and best and most meaningful work of your life right here. And for me, my career was in this really neat intersection of creativity and technology. And so we were in the digital visual content space. And we provided companies where I thought people really had a chance to do some fascinating work in their career. We want to make sure the tech sector, however you want to define the tech sector, we know what a tech company is, that the tech sector is vibrant and flourishing in Alberta and provides those kind of opportunities. And so when we started chatting about this years ago, we said, are we really there? Are we in this economy? And we know based on our location that we have some major industries. And are we really doing the job providing that kind of opportunity for all of Albertans? And I think we felt we were coming up a little bit short. So a bunch of us said, hey, let's get busy and make sure that we do what we can to rally together to make sure everyone can do this work, have tech companies. The second step around that purpose. So let me just stop on that purpose piece and see if there's anything in the chat that comes in. And yes, I hear Gary Ellis who says technology enables every business, not just a vertical. That's true. And what I'm talking about when I say the tech sector are these highly scalable, fast growth, usually digital economy companies, Gary, that are very investable and really provide some kind of new insight. And you're right. When I talk about those, I think we might be able to generate about 5% of Alberta GDP from those companies. And so your comment on the chat, Gary, says technology enables every business. That's exactly right. That's the 95%. So I want Alberta to be a growth province in these technology companies I'm talking about, but most importantly, in the whole 95% of the economy, in healthcare and education, in government services. We really have to move that along. And so good catch there. And why is Alberta different than anywhere else? It's not, except the fact on this chat comment, except the fact that we've had the blessing of having some major industry that has really drawn talent into it for very good and sound reasons. I've been an investor in energy, an investor in commercial real estate, invest all over the place. But as that starts to slow down, then it's natural that we have to find other parts of the economy to pick it up. So Alberta is a little bit behind. And I would say, where are we? There's a question in the chat to me that says, where would we currently say Alberta is? I would say we're probably about 2% of GDP. Maybe we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 or $6 billion. It depends a lot. Do you call Shaw a leading Calgary company? Do you call Shaw Communications one of these digital economy companies? I do, but Shaw's revenue is probably as big as the whole rest of the digital economy sector. So it's important that we recognize the success we have and build off those, but to get the 5% generally would require about a tripling of what we have. We right now, when we measure Alberta tech companies and Alberta tech jobs versus other jurisdictions, Kitchener-Waterloo, Montreal, and Vancouver, we would be offering our citizens roughly about 1/3 per capita the number of companies and the number of jobs as those other regions. So I'm enormously proud of what we have both in Edmonton. Great news this week on the jobber financing, as well as Calgary companies. I was an investor at Benevity, and what Brian and his team has done there is outstanding. They're looking to close that financing this week. So we just need a lot more of them. And so how do we engage on this 10-year mission to get more, to really triple the size, both in jobs and the number of companies that we have doing this? I'm just catching up with the chat. Roadblocks to enablers for tech to capture the rest of 95%. Great education, healthcare, good. Count the folks working in tech remotely for companies not big. So Adam Birkin asked a question. When we talk about jobs and talk about the sector, now that we're all distributed, how do we deal with that? I'm the one asking that question, not answering that question, Adam. I think the fact is, you know, companies still have a bit of a geographic center where that company associates with and where the team is, but that's really diminishing. And so it's a fascinating question. Someone asks, if oil and gas does not drive, then what will? So we're talking about the 5% of these high growth digital economy companies. You're asking a question about the 95% of the economy. If oil and gas doesn't drive, what will? And I think it's a great question. Oil and gas, I think, is in the neighborhood of 20% of GDP, still down a lot, but it clearly has lots of innovation that it offers and lots of innovation to go. And so look at, if we want to be a growth province, providing opportunities for our citizens and keeping our talent here, whatever sector they choose to be in, we have to grow. And so I would say growth is the requirement. Lots in the chat. Someone's asking, speak a little, what consider appropriate measures for assessing growth in complex systems? Yes, I can talk about that. Identify, measure quality of items like quantity of interactions between actors away. Excellent question here. Halette, we need to have Halette lead us in a discussion on this. She's asking such a good question. How do we measure this stuff? Oh, I just saw a question from Mark Retzer. Hello, Mark Retzer. Your thoughts on competing for tech talent with Vancouver Waterloo Tournament versus cooperating? Okay, so starting to come out of the purpose, I think the tone of the questions is having me realize that people get what we're trying to do here. We want Alberta on a per capita basis to be providing the same number of companies and jobs as every other jurisdiction. Then 10 years from now, we'd like that to go past that. So we would like to be the spot on a per capita basis that offers the most opportunities in this area. Okay, I'm going to move on to measures. What do we think about on those measures? And then if you see what's on your screen here and follow along here, one of the premises that we track is look at other regions and say the Toronto-Waterloo corridor currently has 15,000 tech companies and 200,000 tech jobs on a population base of about 6 million. If you back that up to our Calgary-Edmonton population base, because remember, this isn't all of Ontario, just a corridor, back that up to our corridor, we would say to do equally as well, we're 43% of their population. And to do equally as well, we would provide in the neighborhood of 87,000 jobs versus their 200,000, and provide 6,400 tech companies versus their 15,000. That's the 10-year goal that we're trying to get to. And so just, I'm a little behind on the chat, but just pausing there. What we're saying is if we're 43% of the population of Kitchener-Waterloo, we want to provide 43% of the opportunities. And the hard numbers distributed by company size would come out looking exactly like this. This is the Alberta stretch target. And we would have 32 of these like super major tech companies at a 500, averaging like a 700 employees, 1,000. We would have 97 of these 100 to 500 companies. I'm going across the numbers on the very top. We'd have 260 of these, say 70 person tech companies in the province. And we'd have 1,500 of these 5 to 50 person tech companies. And most importantly, we'd have this thriving startup community of 4,500 1 to 4 person employees. And one of the stats I want you to feel on a dynamic like this chart is if you look at that 100 category, 100 to 499 employees, 1 in 100 tech companies in Canada make it through the previous 3 phases to become a 100-person company. And so when Gail's talking about what's going on in Edmonton, and all of us here talking about what's going on in Alberta, and the people focused on Calgary, all of those companies before the 100 employee size, we're going to have to count on only 1 in 100 of those making it through to be that 100-person company. Those are Canada-wide stats. Maybe we can do a little bit better than other regions because we can leapfrog. But for those of you working in the accelerators, and those of you angel investing, and for those of you supporting from SAIT or NAIT or the post-secondaries, we have to really keep the front end of this funnel vibrant to deal with that 1 in 100 making it through 100 people stat. Okay, let me catch up quickly with the chat here on the measures. And then I'll cover a couple measures. Brent Zuber says, I hear a former criticism of starting small business, especially tech, was that the employees would be poached when oil prices rose. Is that still valid? That's that happened to me a lot. Mark Retzer, my former partner, could talk about that, and we welcomed it. You know, business, you don't live in an anti-competitive environment. Families get a chance to move where they can do the best for their family long term, and we're fine with that. So Brent, that's just a competitive reality. Courtney, I don't think is a question, a comment. Thanks. Mackenzie and Christine, hello. Apologies again, Christine. Could be valid if tech companies aren't treated like oil and gas counterparts. Culture is a reason to stay or leave, isn't it? I think that answers part of the question that Brent posed. Appreciate that. Richard asks, businesses through use of cloud resources can really reinvent themselves, but far too often they're limited by old school thinking of applications infrastructure. Yes. Companies like Uber, AMV experiences that the CXO office doesn't understand the capitalization is not a competitive barrier anymore. We get them buying in and really create innovation in Alberta. I don't know, Richard, I don't think you and I have met, but you have just nailed it. You talk about culture, you know, reinvent themselves, and Rainforest leads with the culture piece. And so we do compete, to your comment, Richard, on capitalization. We compete essentially, assume every one of your capital, your competitors, has an unlimited source of capital. And so when it comes to pace and how quickly you have to move to address market opportunities, Richard, I think you're really onto something there. And I'd love to hear more great comment on the chat from Richard. Jason, Alberta focused oil and gas due to location resource. Does Alberta have any competitive advantage going forward for tech companies to be based here and to be successful? Jason, absolutely. That's exactly what we're talking about here. I mean, the advantages that we have is kind of our focus and our willingness to get on a call like this with 100 of our neighbors and say, let's figure this out and let's do it. And that's just the competitive nature of us having citizens, having people like you on this call that can gleam an insight about how the future is going to operate, decide that insight can be something that you can turn into maybe a prototype, maybe an MVP, a prototype, maybe a product. Maybe you can understand the value proposition of that product and what it can be sold for, and then get on with building a company. That's what everybody in the world is doing, Jason, and we just need to be in that game and not pretend that we have any special barriers or competitive moats that can protect us, but just compete and thrive. I just want to mention, in terms of pace in this environment, to the folks at Neo Financial, I don't know if we have anyone on that call, but the pace that the folks at Neo are driving, we did have to make an adjustment to our company slides to move Neo up a couple categories. They're just growing so fast, breakneck speed at what they're doing and rolling out. And I think really a great comparator for us all to have in Alberta about the pace that you have to attack these market opportunities. Dale asked, great to grow companies, but where's the pull coming from? The problems that someone will pay to invest in a solution, it can't all be billed and they will come. Dale, I not sure what you're asking there. The poll that we're coming from. Clarify the question if you have. Heiko, Edmonton has AI. They sure do. Adrian Mitchell asking me directly. Oh, see ya. Ruth Ann, Jensen, working for companies foster psychological safety and health and work cultures. Fantastic, Ruth Ann. I love the comment. And look, you have, for my money, the best good high growth digital tech company in the world in Benevity, right here in Alberta. And so we need to do more there. Pete's asking me privately, what's the 1 in 100 ratio survival rate? Just don't get bigger. Yeah, Pete, they don't make it past that. Only 1 in 100 survive or make it past the 100 employee ratio. Ruth Ann, everyone loving Ruth Ann's comment on social safety. Lots of cool tech focusing on IoT oil applications. Is there still pull from oil and gas? Absolutely. Stephen Rutherford, there's a comment that Calgary, one of the Calgary city organizations came out with, economic development, I think, said, and Al and I talked about this in the podcast, they have a stat that says $22 billion is going to be deployed by Alberta industry in the next 2 years on digitization. And so that shows you the power of thinking about the 95% of the economy. And so there's massive digitization efforts going on. Our friend Derek Hunter often reminds us that there is recovery in oil and gas, but it's a jobless recovery. That jobless recovery is driven to a large extent by technological innovation and efficiencies. And so that's going on there. Good question. Other things catching up in the chat. We're still on purpose measures. COVID has forced their hand. What company's great growth was just mentioned? Marshall Doig, that was Neo Financial. Thank you, Mackenzie and Christine. The founders of Skip the Dishes have chosen to kind of get going with their next couple, 3 family of initiatives out of Calgary. And so we're delighted to have them, and delighted to have them as a comparator, really pushing the pace here in Calgary and looking how fast we have to operate. Brent Zuber imagines a playground merry-go-round where each of us can push, pull to add momentum. Each of us contribute to the ecosystem momentum. Brent, hold that question on how you can contribute, because Bridget loves that question. Aaron asks Brad, why is this metric project important to you specifically? Why should Albertans consider this important to them? Aaron, back to purpose. This is important to me because I believe we want to be a place that allows people from every corner of our cities, every corner of our province, every age, and people from every stage and every sector to do their highest and best work in our province. And I don't think you get there by just rolling along and letting what happened to you happens. I think you have to be very deliberate about inclusivity and diversity and making that happen. So Bridget, I see a bunch more messages below. I'm just catching up. Aaron, Devin, will most of the funding to drive these aspirations, drive Alberta forward, come from the private sector? Yes, Devin, they absolutely will. Importantly, when you think about funding in the rainforest, I really want us to be a movement that thinks about, sure, investment and capital raising, but what really pulls us together as a whole economy, as a whole province, is the best kind of fundraising is early revenue, is revenue from customers. And so when we think what it takes to keep a company alive year to year, you could think about investment capital. And let's be simplistic. Let's say it takes $100,000 a year to keep an employee for a year. So you could have investment capital, or you could have early revenue. And so when Devin asks the question, most of the funding, make sure that we're always thinking about funding as early revenue. That forces us to build better MVPs, build better prototypes, have the customer voice in our ears earlier, and also has us involve local Alberta industry as early customers. We have to break down this bias of Alberta industries and Alberta corporate citizens having a bias against using homegrown technology. And I think we all can do that. We have to break down this bias of Alberta Health and Alberta government agencies having a bias against using Alberta homegrown technology. We have to show them that their work as early customers is as equally important as raising venture, raising angel, raising growth funding. Getting to that early revenue is critical to really build our strong companies here. And I would say, if we can pull together as a province, involving all the other verticals and all the other sectors and having them see their role in being early revenue providers, early customers of Alberta growing tech companies, then I think we can do some of that leapfrogging and get quicker to our goal of being even. Digitization, Brent, those things. Courtney, measure Alberta have in place to protect our kind of the show promise from intellectual theft. Are you working with the federal to end Huawei? Complicated question, Dean. You're kind of out of my pay grade with that one. Khaled asks, how local existing talents are those transforming other industries and tech can compete in the market with international candidates? Remote work resources with those goals by the city, would be any regulation tech companies to hire local first? Great question, Khaled. That's very interesting. I'd love to follow up. Reach out to us on that, because we're doing some work analyzing what are the 20, 30,000 jobs that are going to be created. Dale, are we better certain solutions than others? Am I? Okay. So I want to move on. So we talked about purpose, talked about some other measures. Let me just get a little bit on the arithmetic here about what we're talking about with the measures. So when we talk about these companies, just jot down this kind of arithmetic, because there's some important elements that hold all this together. And that is, when we talk about a high growth company, what we love to see is companies growing through revenue per employee up towards $100,000 per employee. There's a lot of tricky stuff in there. Is it $100,000 of high margin revenue or low margin revenue? But let's just say monitoring the revenue per employee, the employee productivity on a revenue basis of all our tech companies is very important, because we need companies that generate revenue and that grow. We're shooting for 5% of GDP. If we were 5% of GDP, this vision that we have, Alberta's GDP overall is somewhere in the $350 billion neighborhood. If we were 5% of GDP, that would have us generating $17 billion in revenue. And if we were $17 billion in revenue, how much revenue per employee, what metric would we use for revenue employee to say, well, then this is how many jobs would create the whole sector? And the target 10 years from now that we can be shooting for is something like in the neighborhood of $200,000 revenue per employee. If we shot for $200,000 revenue per employee, someone can check my math here, and we had 85,000 employees in these companies with the distribution like Bridget has up on the slide in front of you, then we would be in the neighborhood of $17 billion. Now you say, well, hold on, catch up. What's $200,000 revenue per employee? That's a pretty high performing company. And it is. Look, that would mean as a $1 million company, you'd be able to be a $1 million company or roll through $1 million ARR with 5 employees. But there are companies on the other side of this. When Morgan Stanley ShareWorks, the great Solium team, did their last kind of public filing as a public company before acquisition, I think they were in the neighborhood of $160,000 and still growing like crazy. I know Benevity's moving up into that range. And if you look across our country to Shopify, I think Shopify lives right now in the $400,000 to $500,000 revenue per employee range. So the quality of company that we want to build here, let's have our eyes on a really high bar like that $200,000 per employee. With $200,000 and 85,000 employees, no one has corrected my math on the chat. We're in the neighborhood of 17 billion and 5%. That's a lot of innovation. That's a lot of customer success. And those are the measures that we track. Then importantly, even on initiatives like Rainforest, we have our annual index that we track and see how we're doing. So to someone's comment, what advantages does Alberta have to really say, we're going to join Kitchener-Waterloo, we're going to join Toronto, we're going to join Montreal, we're going to join Vancouver and be a spot that offers just as many companies, financing, success, jobs as these other regions? I think it's just the same amount of hard work. You know, if I get all historical on you, in our ag sector in Alberta originally, you know, we didn't show up here and say, oh, great, all the land is cleared, all the crop rotation is discovered, and all we have to do is walk by and easily seed these fields, and we can have a great agriculture industry. We had to build it season by season, year by year. In conventional oil and gas, we had to invent that. We had to innovate that off the back of pickup truck tailgates and know-how and build that in unconventional oil and gas. In our financial sector, all those we have to build. And this 5% of the economy, when you look at companies like Jobber and you look at companies like Morgan Stanley ShareWorks, we absolutely have the ability for our homegrown teams to succeed globally with these kind of stuff. So those are the kind of measures that we can walk into. And lastly, I appreciate, Heiko, your comment on not suitable. Lastly, on to method. And that's really where the discussion is today. I love the fact that Gail led into this discussion with saying, you know, the rainforest is this wild and woolly and rainy and wet and moist and place that everything is growing tangled up with everything else. And there is a spot for the rainforest, and there's also a spot, Gail, you're an engineer, to move along into some agriculture and into some farming. And so when I talk about methods, I think we love the rainforest, we love meeting each other, we live by the social contract, we strive to pay it forward. But when we have an initiative, how do we actually have the discipline to have the strategy and get busy with some initiatives to get this done? Out of the rainforest, something important for everyone on this call to get familiar with, the Libby podcast. The Libby podcast that Al Daldegan and so many of the other great hosts have volunteered to do doesn't just happen in an unorganized, take any technology kind of way, post it anywhere thing. It's a bit of a farming operation, and Al does a great job of developing a tool set to do it. And then so many of the other organizations, Gail, that you're with, Edmonton has many. In Calgary, we have the CIC, the Calgary Innovation Coalition. All those organizations, on the one hand, have to support all the wildness of the rainforest, and on the other hand, have to, for their board of directors and their executive team, deliver like factory farms these reliable goals and reliable outputs. And so we've talked about purpose, and then we've talked about some of the measures that we have to really ring fence who the kind of companies are and how much success we want them to have. And last, what are all the methods that we're coming together on to have kind of an engineered approach to get to some of these growth things? How do we, in the Calgary example, add 200, probably 200 new 1 to 5 person startups every single year? That's 4 new starts every single week of the year. How many conversations, how many introductions do we have to have going on in our city? How much buzz to be able to have 4 of new start teams go every single year? So that's the purpose of Rainforest, is to make sure in this little 5%, these growth companies, that we're doing okay. The measures we've talked about, we know what we have to do to get there. We know what size they're going to be. We know what the funnel looks like. And then the method. What are all the methods that we have to support? When I think of all the work and all the talent and all the brilliance in Calgary, we have, you know, the great program at MRU, and all the effort and all the students that have built great businesses out of that. And now we're saying all of that across our province has got us kind of to the 40% mark. Then, you know, for us to kind of lock arms with each other for the next 10 years of this journey and say, you know, we need more of what Ray DePaul and MRU can offer us in this city. We have to keep that part going, but we need more. We need to now triple our efforts over the next 10 years to really meet our potential as a province in this tech sector. And I'll kind of slow down there and either start to turn it back over to you, Bridget, or see if there's more engagement that we have on the chat here. But questions if I left anything out. Oh, Mark Olson, a great question here. Problem is 200K companies don't just fall out of the sky. Yeah, that's true. They start as small companies that lose money. Maybe. Investors and innovation groups need to become less risk averse and work understanding. Yes, Mark, totally agree with that. That's the 95% playing nicely with the 5%. Great comment though, well informed. Brent Zuber, Calgary is one of the most livable cities in the world. Great green spaces, good community resources. We can understand the big dark family settle down. Not sure about Edmonton. Whoa, wow. Shot across the bow in Edmonton. I don't know about that. But hey, Brent, balance. What you're saying about Calgary and Alberta is all true. You have to balance that once you're here, the pace that you have to be prepared to work at to compete globally needs to be keeping you pretty close to the keyboard. And I think companies like Neo that are pushing that pace, I think Neo's hired maybe 30, 40 people in the last month, is pushing that pace so hard. It's a reminder, yes, it's a great place, but to compete globally, to make it through that 100-person barrier that have already made it through, you got to really drive pace and really be hustling. Patrick, also a bit of caution, not to rely on trickle down, only whatever I need more of these companies. Honestly, Calgary's not a city to live in. Work from home isn't going to be for everyone. Yes. Savannah, any specific companies you're watching, Brad? I'd love to know what's catching your eye right now. Stephen Rutherford. Stephen, Bridget, if I could just have you screen share the whole portfolio list.
Sure, it'll just take me a minute to pull that one up.
No problem. To answer your question, Stephen, yeah, every company on that list. You, in the rainforest, if we could fall deeply in love with the breadth and shape of our whole portfolio of tech companies, that would be fantastic. And so the specific companies that we're watching, Jobber's having a huge week. Benevity's got a closing next Friday that's absolutely world-class and gargantuan. I got to talk with Marcos from Morgan Stanley Shareworks just before Christmas for an hour. And what he's doing there is just blowing my mind. Just so proud of all of them. But we could do nothing better at Rainforest. If you say Rainforest, in order to what? And our in order to what is look at all these companies battling globally, trying to get customers, trying to add talent, trying to compete out of this province. This is what we have Rainforest for. for their success, for them to add to their team, for them to add to their customers. I love watching what the big ones are doing on the right side of the chart, but be very concerned about the numbers game we're seeing at the left side of the chart, right? I love thinking about the opportunity, and then we're showing the Calgary ones, and that's fine, Bridget, just leave it there. But a company like Shaw, you know, we have this digital leader here, $6 billion in revenue, $14 billion market cap. $6 billion in revenue in Shaw, $14 billion market cap. And Shaw probably feels pretty lonely here in Calgary, in Alberta. But the fact is, what you all are doing, this group of 100 and the thousands other in Alberta, what you all are doing are starting to build peer companies to a company with a $14 billion market cap. Having a $1 billion market cap as Morgan Stanley Shareworks or Benevity makes you in that same considerable kind of peer to like Shaw Communications. So we can do this. Those people can compare notes at what it means to run their job function at the executive team at a Shaw and at a Benevity and a Morgan Stanley Shareworks. We're beginning to close the gap to these multi-billion-dollar valuation companies, and that's fantastic. So great question on, are there any that we watch? Let's watch them all and compare notes on these. 10-year goal, including metrics for measuring the number of community building organizations required to support growth. Don't have that with me. I would only say that the community organizations that we have now need to collaborate and work together, and we need to have more of them and resource them more. The overall amount of resourcing that we've put into getting to the 40% level probably needs to be doubled or tripled to get us to the 100% size of those other folks. So great comment on that. Is this list of companies on Slack? We've seen some great announcements lately for later stage finance. Do you have some commentary, Brad, on the evolution of who is playing in the early stage funding in the province in the last couple of years since Rainforest kicked off? My favorite, and I'm an investor in, I'll mention a couple, I'll mention three, the Accelerate Fund. Dave Edmonds run the Accelerate Fund. Please keep an eye on where they are. Dave Edmonds is a fantastic boost for our whole province, a personal friend and a mentor of mine, and a long-lived, very successful tech founder. Accelerate Fund. I'm an investor with Pat Lohr at Panache Ventures. I'm an investor in Yaletown. Yaletown does have some money set aside for seed. Importantly, I'm an investor recently in a small way with the group Shelley Kuipers, Allison Reimer, Judy Fairburn at the 51. It's a female female-led early stage fund looking to invest in female founders. That kind of stuff we have to push along. But look at all those areas, whoever asked the question about early stage funding, and let's continue to compare notes on that. Bridget, should I keep going answering questions here, or should we, thanks Courtney for putting the link up there, well done. Or should we, Gustin, yes.
We'll go a couple more minutes, Brad.
Let me see what else comes up here. So I would say, why platform? So this is a Calgary approach. Now bear with us a little bit, Edmonton. It's number one. I think, you know, for years and years we've done great work building the tech sector. We've got it to 40%, not notionally of where it should be. What got us to where we are isn't going to get us to where we have to get to on this 10-year goal. We need every support organization in Calgary and in Alberta to have its best 10 years to get us to these caliber of goals. And I think an organization like Platform needs to say to our citizens in Calgary that we think what your talent can bring to this sector, what you can bring to your city, deserves a headquarters, a barn, a take-all-comers innovation center for everyone like Platform, to remind us that we have to get to this kind of goal. that we have a long way to go. We've come a long way. We're so proud of the companies that we have, and we need more of them. And we're going to link arms and get together. The team at Platform has done a great job. I think they have something like 40 memorandums of understanding signed to say we're all going to support each other and we're going to work together in a new way, different than we've ever had before, to get us to those kind of 10-year goals. In the rainforest model, we call out this piece called infrastructure. And it's a good word. The infrastructure that got us to the 40% level is not the level of infrastructure that's going to get us to the 100% level, say 10 years from now. And so we need to be courageous and be brave and be willing to join the team at Platform, as I have, in funding the infrastructure that's going to get us through the next 10 years. There were brave Alberta citizens that put up infrastructure dollars in Edmonton and in Calgary to get us to where we are. And now all of us need to be asking the question of ourselves, we need to be building more infrastructure for the next generations. Are we willing to join in and build that infrastructure? Or are we reluctant? And I would urge you to be willing, do stuff like you're doing on this call, and join us in continuing to transform our economy in the direction and the jobs that these tech firms can provide.
Awesome.
I see you've got the lovely survey up there. Way to be data-driven, Bridget. Any other questions in the chat that I'm missing?
Companies. Brad, I am not sure about this as far as posting the Butterfly Project documents on the Slack channel. We'll look into that after today. Yeah,
let's have a discussion. Someone said they're Tom Pevnovac is seconding and thirding comments on making listed companies available to all. Tom, I don't know if it's legal for you to second and third the comments yourself. But I'd love to do that. I mean, we put that together in a PDF form for a reason. There's important work to support on Start Alberta that's doing a database version of this as well. But I really want all of our discussions around the tech sector in Alberta to be rooted in data, not opinion. And so that's the piece to all of you that have helped with that. That's the piece that gives us the data and gives our conversations context to talk about what we really have here. So 2 minutes to go. Dave Shackleton asked, how are those companies put together? Lovely question. I was fed up, Dave, that we never had a list like this to see all of the companies. And Dave Edmonds and I from the A100 had some debates about how many companies really are there, Calgary and Edmonton, and we talked back and forth. And finally, some lovely people on my staff at my office got together and just started reaching out to every tech company we could find, every smaller list, every collection of a vertical list. And we went and personally verified, telephone verified, every single company on that list was telephone verified. And now we're going to keep going with that, updating that as we go. But it's my old-fashioned view to put that in a single PDF graphic to always see the scope. But that's how we've pulled it together. Lots of stuff coming in on the chat here. Bridget, I'll turn it back to you. I don't know what we do here at 12:59.
Well, we keep the room open for anyone who wants to continue the conversation or collaborate. I'm not sure, Brad, if you have time for that, but others, the room is open. And I guess a quick mention that a more detailed scorecard report that we ran in the fall is now available on the website. Some really interesting nuggets of information there for everyone in the ecosystem. And if there's any other announcements, feel free to throw them in the chat. I know Al is always looking. We just had the 100th episode of the Libby podcast air this week with Brad as guest, and we're always looking for more hosts and guests for the show. And again, any other announcements, throw them in there. Next week, please. I really want to keep this momentum going, starting off super strong for 2021. So please put this in your calendar as a reoccurring event. And, if you can come. If you can't do it weekly, come quarterly, whatever works for you. But please keep showing up because it's important, especially when we get to that networking time and people have time to make connections and collaborate and have more of those meetings. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you, Gail, and everyone from Edmonton. And we will see you next week.
And Bridget, I'm good for half an hour.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Thank you. All right, we'll leave the room open. Thanks, everybody.